All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. We have a big escalation on the Venezuela front here. U.S. forces seize an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. So President Trump said on Wednesday that U.S. forces have seized an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela, marking the latest U.S. escalation in its push toward war with the country. So Trump said during an event at the White House, quote, "As you probably know, we've just seized a tanker on the coast of Venezuela. A large tanker, very large, largest one ever seized, actually, and other things are happening," end quote. So U.S. officials told CBS News that the seizure involved 10 members of the U.S. Coast Guard, 10 U.S. Marines, and Special Operations Forces. Other reports said that the tanker, named the Skipper, departed Venezuela and was on its way to Cuba when it was boarded by U.S. forces. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi released footage of the operation and claimed that the tanker was used to transport oil from Venezuela and Iran. She said the tanker had been sanctioned by the U.S. for multiple years. So you could see the video here. It actually shows U.S. forces, U.S. troops coming in on a helicopter and going down onto the tanker and approaching the the pilot house, entering the pilot house. You know what this reminds me of is videos that the Houthis have put out of them seizing ships off the coast of Yemen. And this seizure, U.S. seizure of this tanker, comes less than a month after the U.S. military condemned Iran for seizing a tanker in the Strait of Hormuz off of its coast. It claimed that the tanker was smuggling Iranian fuel. This is the statement from U.S. Central Command, from the U.S. military, less than a month ago. CENTCOM said, quote, "Iran's use of military forces to conduct an armed boarding and seizure of a commercial vessel in international waters constitutes a blatant violation of international law, undermining freedom of navigation and the free flow of commerce. We call on Iran to articulate to the international community the legal basis for its actions," end quote. And then the U.S. goes and does this. So President Trump was asked what would happen to the oil, and he replied, quote, "Well, we keep it, I guess," end quote. So in any scenario where another country boarded and seized a oil tanker that was carrying American oil off the coast of the U.S., that would be treated as an act of war. So this is a major escalation here. And during the first Trump administration, the U.S. actually did seize, just outright steal, Iranian gas shipments that were bound for Venezuela. And the way that the U.S. did this was they basically threatened the shipping owners and the insurers that if they didn't give up, that there would be serious consequences if they didn't send these ships to the U.S. So they actually docked in the U.S., unloaded their cargo, and the U.S. sold off the gas. But in this case, you actually have troops descending down onto the tanker. And during the first Trump administration was when Iran and Venezuela's energy ties began to really grow because both countries were facing very heavy U.S. sanctions. And they actually started trading gas for gold. Iran was sending gas to Venezuela, and Venezuela was shipping gold to Iran in exchange. And then the U.S. started actually seizing and, outright stealing. When you take the cargo and sell it, that's theft, no matter how they try to dress it up, with their sanctions and things, trying to make it seem legitimate. But this is theft. This is piracy, what we see here, descending on this ship here. Again, this is just a big escalation. And, the proponents of war here, the people who really want regime change war, keep pointing to Venezuela's oil resources. It's funny. You read these stories about this kind of, everything that's going on here. And you'll see some outlets quote Maduro and say, "Oh, Maduro claims that this is about oil, that the U.S. wants its oil." But then you see the people who are pushing for this outright saying that, yeah, there's a lot of oil. We got to get that oil. And now they're actually seizing tankers here and taking the oil. All right, so the next one here, broad slice of Americans oppose Venezuela boat strikes. And this is according to a new poll from Reuters Ipsos. So A broad swath of Americans opposed the U.S. military campaign of deadly strikes on boats suspected of carrying illegal drugs in the Caribbean and Pacific waters near Venezuela, including about one-fifth of President Donald Trump's Republicans, a Reuters Ipsos poll found. So about half of respondents, 48%, said that they opposed conducting the strikes that have killed 87 people without first getting authorization from a judge or court, while 34% said they supported them. 18% were unsure or undecided. Among Republicans, 67% supported the strikes and 19% opposed them. Among Democrats, 80% opposed the strikes and 9% supported them. The 6-day poll, which concluded on Monday, comes amid mounting tensions between the U.S. and Venezuela. This is straight up just American aggression against Venezuela. The idea, kind of calling it like mounting, rising tensions. It makes it seem like Venezuela is doing something in return, but this is all the U.S. And you have Maduro even saying, talking with Trump, accepting deportation flights, saying he's willing to work with them. But anyway, so just an interesting poll here, because they asked the question properly. They said, do you support blowing people up on these boats without authorization from a judge, without involvement from a court? There was another recent poll that found that asked the question in a similar way and found just 29% of respondents said that they supported these extrajudicial executions at sea. All right, so the next one here, inside the Pentagon's scramble to deal with boat strike survivors. So this is a report from the New York Times. And, the fact that if it's a small little boat that they claim is carrying drugs, they blow it up. They showed today that they're able to interdict and seize vessels if they choose to. So this is about, if you remember back in mid-October, the U.S. blew up one of these boats and they actually picked up 2 survivors. And this is kind of about what they should do with them. So again, this is after the strike. On a call with counterparts at the State Department, Pentagon lawyers floated an idea. They asked whether the 2 survivors could be put in a notorious prison in El Salvador, to which the Trump administration had sent hundreds of Venezuelan deportees, 3 officials said. The State Department lawyers were stunned, one official said, and rejected the idea. The survivors ended up being repatriated to their home countries of Colombia and Ecuador, and they were let go. Their government said they didn't have evidence that they were involved in drug trafficking. And a little under 2 weeks later, on October 29th, so after this happened, Pentagon officials convened another session about boat strike survivors, a video conference including dozens of American diplomats from across the Western Hemisphere. The message was that any rescued survivors should be sent back to their home countries or to a third country, said 3 other officials who, like others interviewed for this article, spoke on the condition of anonymity. Behind that policy was a quieter goal to ensure survivors did not end up in the U.S. judicial system, where court cases could force the administration to show evidence justifying President Trump's military campaign, justifying, what these extrajudicial executions. So essentially, they're saying that the goal is to keep these people out of court so they don't have to back up their claims against them. I think this is very, very revealing kind of the whole thing. And I think this was clear when that initially happened in October and they sent them back to Colombia and Ecuador. There might have been some other reporting, but I think it was pretty clear that was, they sent them there because they didn't want to have to actually produce, go to court, face lawsuits and things about them.